Picture this. You're a photographer who nobody notices. Not too hard in this day and age to imagine, where everybody's snapping pictures. But you really want somebody, anybody, to notice your work. Maybe you want somebody to tell you that they're great. Or maybe you want somebody to tell you how your pictures can become great. None of today's social media platforms are built for people who aren't very good at being popular. So you feel like you're stuck. Where do you go? Naturally, to anti-social media. ARS, in many ways, is the antithesis of hashtag photography on the internet. It's a platform that's designed to be divorced from the likes and follows and sharing that you'd be seeing on other platforms like Instagram. Instead, ARS is meant to be art for the sake of art. Everybody on ARS is anonymous. ARS is meant to be art for art's own sake. In the words of their official press kit, it's an online photography feedback platform driven by giving and receiving honest and constructive critiques. Essentially, users upload photographs and other users judge those photographs. The judging is anonymous. The criteria, simple: keep or ditch, along with some explanation as to why you should keep or ditch the picture. I used ARS at an earlier point in its beta, and I was pleasantly surprised by what I found. A clean, simple interface with no ads, follow buttons, or calls to action. Remember to follow @ThePhotoChan on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Friendster, MySpace, Bebo. Your friendly neighborhood BBS? Yeah, there's none of that on ARS. The purpose of ARS is to separate art from its artists. Will people still appreciate your work if they don't know that you're the one who made it? Instead of counting on likes from friends, how about anonymous critics telling you if you're good or not? This isn't an entirely new concept on the internet. The photo critique subreddit has existed for over a decade. The photo critique subreddit, however, is still bound to Reddit as a forum. That platform still has usernames and such attached. If you want to add some sort of story to your picture, you can go ahead and do so. ARS, however, is the complete opposite. Your pictures are presented without any sort of context. ARS is all about the image. Now, I first started using ARS last year, and I liked it, but I dropped it after a while. I liked the concept a lot, but it felt like a few key elements were missing. Here in 2019, however, ARS has made a few adjustments. They've improved their platform, but they haven't complicated it. At the moment, ARS is extremely clean and simple to use. Still, there are no ads, no follow buttons, no calls to action, etc. There's nothing to distract you from the pure photo critique experience. Say what you like, say what you don't, that's it. There are no other feedback mechanisms. In fact, ARS doesn't even have notifications, which honestly kind of seems like a mistake. If you want to figure out whether or not somebody appreciated your pictures, you actually have to go to your profile and look at those pictures to see the comments and percentage of likes to dislikes against the picture. It's a minor nuisance, but adding notifications I don't think would hurt the minimalism of the platform. Now, in the platform's most recent update, they've added ARS Coin, a currency which you cannot exchange for US dollars, Canadian dollars, or pesos. However, you can use ARS coins in order to purchase criticisms from people who have previously criticized your work. You earn ARS coins, you guessed it, by criticizing pictures. ARS bills itself as the anti-social media, and it shows. By freeing itself of the shackles of traditional social media trappings, it's meant to be liberating for photographers. Are you worried that people might not love your work enough before you put it online? Are you concerned that your mom only likes your pictures because you're her precious little photographer? Are you a famous photographer wrestling with the notion that you might not actually be good and it's just your name that's gotten you this far? Maybe you want to experiment with a new style of photography, but you're not sure how people would take to it, and you don't want to go ahead and jump the gun putting it on your Facebook or Instagram before you have some idea of how you can improve it. Are you worried that you don't put the right hashtags on your images in order to get them noticed? If you fall into any of these buckets, ARS may be right for you. So far, ARS seems to fulfill the anti-social media goal very well. I find that I'm paying more than the usual attention to the pictures that I'm looking at. It's a fantastic visual exercise. I'm asking myself, does this picture work in terms of composition, in terms of lighting, in terms of color? Do I like this picture aesthetically? Do I appreciate the story that the picture tells? Or am I just liking this picture because it's what I'm expected to do? Does it check the boxes, but is it dead behind the eyes? One could make the argument that because images are presented on the platform without any sort of context, their meaning through said context is inevitably lost. This is true. However, how does the old adage go? A picture is worth 1,000 words, and a 4-sentence criticism on ARS is worth 5 ARS coins. The purpose of ARS is the judgment of the image and only the image. If your picture tells a story and tells it well without any context, that is a good image. If your picture is purely aesthetically pleasing, that's also a good image. If, however, your picture requires context to be moving or interesting, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have a bad image, but from a purely objective artistic standpoint, an oxymoron, I know, you might not necessarily have a good image on your hand. You might have an image of a good moment. There is, of course, value to having an image of a good moment. That said, that's not what ARS is there to criticize. ARS exists purely for the sake of judging the aesthetic of your image. When I first used ARS back in the autumn of 2018, I noticed what I thought to be a rather serious problem. It seemed as though certain sorts of images gained traction on ARS. It was largely street photos, black and white things, architectural images, stuff with strong leading lines. There was nothing wrong with these pictures per se. A lot of them were fantastic. The trouble is, it seemed as though other sorts of pictures were getting ignored on the platform. For instance, product photography? Totally overlooked. Case in point, I took a picture of my Lytro camera. It was a pretty decent picture. Product photography. It gained no traction on ARS. 83% of ARS users who saw the picture disliked it. There was nothing wrong with the picture. In fact, it was perfectly good product photography. That, however, is not the sort of photography that ARS seems to reward, which I thought to be a bit of an issue. The thing is, ARS is billing itself as a platform for all sorts of photographers to get judged anonymously and fairly. So if you are an urban or a street photographer, you're going to have a great time on ARS. That said, photography isn't any single style. Photography is an art form made of many, many styles and genres. Hence, if you feel that your style isn't necessarily well represented on ARS, it might not do so well. Now, to be fair to ARS and its users, there are some top-rated images on the platform that buck the trend of moody black and white photos of old people smoking on the streets of Shanghai. These are images that are well regarded among the users, but these pictures are the exception and not the rule. What makes a picture of a man walking down the street so much greater than a picture of a great sweeping landscape somewhere in the mountains? There's no doubt that the ARS community is biased in favor of certain sorts of photography. This makes the platform less useful for users who make art that falls outside those bounds. The danger of a platform like ARS, as it stands, lies in taking the word of anonymous strangers as gospel. Nobody likes this picture, so it must be bad, right? Who is this nobody, exactly? Perhaps the images that you rate should give you some clue as to the user base of ARS. Sure, there are a lot of really great photographers on there, but there are also some people who are evidently just starting out, and I think it's wonderful that they're submitting their photos for criticism. That said, there are also people who are in that intermediate phase of photography. People who think they're good because they've learned some technical elements of photography, but haven't yet grasped some of the finer, more artistic elements. I'm guessing some of those people are watching this video right now, in which case, hello. Because those people are in that phase of photography, it doesn't necessarily mean that their criticism is any less valuable. I'm pretty sure that a lot of those people who are in that intermediate phase can give perfectly good critique. That said, if they're going to be looking at your photography from their perspective, what anybody thinks makes a good picture is subjective. It's up to them. What I like about a picture isn't going to be what you like about a picture. Conversely, what you hate about my photography could be the very thing that I love. There's nothing wrong with that. Before you let the masses decide what your pictures are, first consider who the masses are. Now, the platform's update introducing ARS coin actually requires users to offer some sort of criticism, anything, before they vote keep or ditch on a picture. In my opinion, this was a step in the right direction. After the update, I've noticed that a good chunk of the negative criticism directed at my pictures comes from people who have very little to actually say. There are a significant number of comments that are just no. Not helpful criticism, but at the same time it tells me that those people really aren't going to tell me anything useful, hence maybe their ditch votes shouldn't have the sort of weight that the weight of somebody who, say, takes the time to tell me exactly what's wrong with my pictures does. Those people who do offer actual feedback are offering insight into what I can do to make my pictures better, and I appreciate that a lot. I love the concept of ARS, believe me. Having sorted through thousands of pictures, I believe has actually made me a better photographer. It's a sort of visual exercise that has given me insight into my own process, and into what makes a picture truly great. In spite of the platform's issues, I've actually gotten some really good feedback as to how I can improve my own images. However, the platform does have its limitations, and those limitations are in part a product of its user base, but also in large part because of the platform's very simplicity, which keeps drawing me back to it. What could improve ARS in the future? I think that the system would actually improve if it had some sort of sorting. A system of categorization could improve ARS by allowing users to place their pictures into little boxes. For instance, a good product photo is going to be judged on a very different rubric from a good abstract photo. What makes a great landscape isn't necessarily what makes for good street photography. What makes for good candid photos? Very different from what makes for good posed photographs. Looking through the site's top-rated images, right now there's no astrophotography or macrophotography represented at all. This was the case when I first started using ARS, and it continues to be the case today. Product photography? Nope, none. Am I to believe that there are no macro shooters or product photographers using ARS? I don't think that's the case. However, because of the images that the user base values, you're not going to be seeing these anytime soon unless we see something change. It's not enough to ask random users if a random picture is any good. Asking such questions as, is this a good product shot? Or is this an example of good macro photography? Or asking, does this abstract photograph present aesthetically interesting elements, strikes me as far more productive to the platform's users and much more conducive to its longevity. That said, the simplicity of ARS is a huge part of its appeal. Complicating the design could scare people off. What do you think about ARS? Hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at @thephotochan with 2 N's with your thoughts.